Excellent. Thank you very much, Michelle, Nicola, and Ellen. It's my pleasure to welcome Senator Richard Burr and Jeff Baglio, partner at DLA Piper, to come to the stage for the next opening keynote fireside chat. So, Jeff and Senator Richard, over to you, please.
Thanks, James.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to be back here at GCVI in Monterey. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Jeff Baglio. I'm a corporate partner in the San Diego office at DLA Piper, and I chair our corporate venture group. And I'm very happy to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Senator Richard Burr. A little chat on kind of current policy environment and how it's impacting the business landscape that we're all working in. So let me first introduce the senator. Senator Burr represented North Carolina in the U.S. Congress for 28 years. Today, he's widely known as one of the foremost authorities in healthcare, life sciences, higher education, geopolitical risk, and national security policy. First elected to the U.S. House, North Carolina's 5th District in 1994, he went on to serve 5 terms in the House, where he was a member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. In 2004, he was elected to the Senate, and in his 3 terms in the Senate, Senator Burr served as chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Today, he's a principal policy advisor at the Government Affairs and Public Policy Practice at DLA Piper. He provides policy advice, strategic consulting, navigating a rapidly changing policy landscape for our clients with their significant regulatory and political uncertainty, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So thank you very much for being here today.
Good to be here.
Let me first ask you, so you've spent decades at the intersection of policy and business, both as a lawmaker and now in the private sector. So how should businesses and innovation leaders be thinking about the pace of change in Washington today?
Well, Jeff, first and foremost, thanks for the invitation to be here, and to the sponsors, thank you for your sponsorship of this. When I was still a member, and let me emphasize the fact, I am former now, so all those things you think about Congress today, they don't apply to me. But I used to say that Congress moved at a pace that you could actually watch hair grow, and I think they're living up to that right now. The challenging thing is that the economy doesn't wait for regulators and policymakers to set the rules of the road. And as we move forward, one of the reasons that I'm not retired and I'm at DLA doing what I'm doing is that I think the next 10 to 20 years are going to be the most exciting opportunities in my lifetime to see business change, grow, and the sectors where I'll actually be created that my grandchildren will work in, sectors that don't even exist today. As chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and you might know this about the United States Congress and the government, there is no Department of Technology, there is no Committee of Technology on Capitol Hill. So the intelligence community de facto became the Committee of Technology, because we were the only ones that got an opportunity to actually look around the corner to see what was going on. And I would say this to each and every one of you just hearing the last speakers. What you do from a standpoint of venture is the most important thing to your CEO and board that they could possibly tap into. You are an intelligence operation for the corporation that you work for. And the only problem is I don't think CEOs and boards recognize that yet. But you're out in the frontier looking at things that 5 years, 10 years down the road are going to mature, making investments in it that are absolutely essential to the business decisions that companies are making today, tomorrow, next week. And I urge each and every one of you, push your CEOs to to sit down on a regular basis with you and really download to them what you see on the landscape, because intelligence in a pace that we're moving today on innovation is absolutely crucial for the right business decisions to be made. And when you match that with the chaos that exists globally, quite frankly, it's the only thing that cuts through and gives clarity as to what decisions should be made.
So, from your vantage point, how would you characterize kind of the current policy environment in the U.S.? Is this deliberate transformation we have, or managed uncertainty?
I'll let you know after I go through TSA in San Francisco Airport today. Clearly the government's not going to open up or fund DHS. So I guess it's probably the latter, managed, what did you?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Listen, there's a lot of uncertainty, but let me just state this. In all chaos, there is opportunity. The question is what you focus on. If you want to focus on the chaos, that's fine. Chaos provides you no new opportunities. In many cases, it distorts what you're really seeing. If you're focused on the opportunity and you're not consumed with the chaos, there's innovation happening in every sector, in every area of the world, but you'll never see it if you're only focused on the chaos. So cut through that and really try to focus on the things that give you great indicators as to what's going to be hot. And do the policymakers impact that? Sure. It's usually negative, though. And I'll use a great example. Europe was quick to regulate AI. As soon as they regulated AI, capital quit, go into Europe, and the United States was the beneficiary and some other places around the world. Regulators can have a devastating impact on the flow of capital, and capital is absolutely essential to those companies that are trying to innovate. So, though the U.S. will probably be criticized for being slow to regulate AI, I think that's the smart decision. When I got to Congress in 1995, the first issue I had to deal with on the Energy and Commerce Committee was, are we going to tax the internet sales? 1995, we unanimously, Republicans and Democrats, agreed that we weren't going to do it because we didn't want to do anything to thwart what the internet could grow into. 17 years later, I voted to tax it because I figured it was mature enough. Unfortunately, I still don't know what it's going to grow into. And I thought in 1995 we would know certainly 10 years later or 20 years later, but now we're 30 years later and we still don't exactly know what it's going to grow into. And that shows you the power of innovation. And it shows you why legislators can't think that they know everything.
So switching stages a little bit to security, I mean, clearly you've spent, with all this intelligence and the time you spent, as you said, on the technology committee, you spent time in that intersection of policy and national security. What keeps you up at night now?
So if I was asked that question when I served, the answer was what I don't know. What keeps me up now is what I do know. And it's the reality of what's possible. And most technological innovations today have a positive and a negative side. Biologic innovation is going to allow us to cure a lot of diseases, a lot of healthcare issues that we've struggled with for decades with no solution. It's also going to allow individuals who want to carry out nefarious things to do that and to do it without fingerprints. So attribution becomes much more difficult. When you look at it and you try to weigh the positives and negatives, clearly the positives outweigh the negatives, but it means there always has to be an effort to understand what the potential threats might be that are developed out of innovation and continue to refine what the responses and defense mechanisms should be. And as I said about the Intelligence Committee being the Committee of Technology, we looked at things on a regular basis like AI and quantum and the efforts that were going on inside the United States government. But we looked at it through the eyes of a defensive capability, not an offensive capability. That's for the private sector to do. And quite frankly, that's why you've seen a change in the way wars are fought. And Ukraine has been a great example. It's not about tanks. It's really not about soldiers now. It's about technology and the ability to use technology as a force multiplier in a way that saves lives but changes the balance of the war. And I think Iran is an extension of that now, and you're seeing the United States, the largest military in the world, along with our allied partners, waking up and realizing the investments that we've made weren't the right ones. We should have been invested in cheap, off-the-shelf technologies that can truly be used as a force multiplier and don't put men and women in harm's way. So we're seeing a transition there, and I think one of the largest areas of investment going forward, especially, is going to be European defense manufacturers who emerge and who begin to feed sort of the global defensive needs that are out there. And you'll see some of that today. Is the first, yesterday and today are the first days of negotiating a charter for a new national security bank, the Defense Security Resilience Bank, which is going to be led by Canada as the lead G7 partner, and will be the international headquarters, I think, for the Defense Security Resilience Bank. This is an off-balance sheet way for all of Europe and parts of Southeast Asia to finance their national defense commitments to NATO of 5%, and to do it with long-term, low-interest rate loans. And all of a sudden, it opens up a brand new market for Europe and for many areas in Southeast Asia.
So last question on the kind of geopolitical tension. We obviously, with all the conflict going on today and conversations about where the next conflict might be, do you see a set of circumstances where things might slow down on the global conflict stage, or is this a new norm for us of you basically increased use of cross-border force globally?
Well, the good news is between here and San Francisco Airport coming yesterday, there's 17 psychics. So I stopped at 4 of them to try to figure out exactly what's going to happen. No, you know, Jeff, it's a question that really nobody can answer because we're so much about personalities now.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't think anybody would disagree with this statement. President Trump negotiates differently than most people. And sometimes it's difficult to understand which part of it's negotiating and which part of it is just an effort to control the news cycle. But he controls 24 out of 24 news cycles every day. So he's pretty skilled at that ability. I think this is probably the new norm, and I think it's not necessarily driven off of conflict. I think it's driven off of competition. And to have true competition, you have to eliminate uncertainties. For those that maybe are sympathetic to Iran, just as an example, I'm not picking sides here. Listen, when you go out and tell the world we don't have missiles that go over 2,000 miles, and then you fire a missile at Diego Garcia against the UK-US base, which is 2,800 kilometers, it proves everything you said was wrong. So I think most leaders around the world actually applaud the effort to try to put Iran back in a box that's not threatening every day. But actions like this have consequences, and leaders choose to do it different ways. My hope is that this will be the last military conflict that we see in a while. But make no mistake about it, we're carrying 2 military conflicts on, really 3 conflicts on, at a time that the whole world is trying to redesign the supply chain to the West. and I really want to emphasize this. The supply chain has to be redesigned, and China is going to become less and less a part of that supply chain. If it doesn't pan out like that, then the intelligence world that I was in for 30 years was in fact wrong the whole time. But that type of intelligence is absolutely crucial to CEOs and boards as they make decisions. It's crucial to you as you make investments. You can invest in a great company that's not tied into anybody's market, and it may have looked good, but it's not got a market behind it. So how the market is designed and how it interacts is absolutely crucial to a good investment.
So let's talk about the supply chain. So we've all seen what uncertainty in trade does to business and markets. Do you, from here, do you expect further fragmentation of the global trading system, more tariffs, export controls, more disruption? Or do you feel like we're kind of getting towards a new equilibrium?
You know, it would be nice if the president was still going to Beijing next week, but that's been pushed. And quite frankly, I'm not sure it's ever going to happen. And I think that tells you a little bit about the problems that still exist. You don't have to hit rewind too long to remember 2020, when most of the world was cut off from personal protective gear, API that pharmaceutical companies needed to do development for vaccines. And it wasn't just the United States, it was the entire world. And all of it was controlled by China. I think at least policymakers don't forget that. And I think when you look at the Congress of the United States and you see a special committee about the Chinese Communist Party, you recognize the fact that there's only one issue that draws bipartisan support today, and it's legislation that separates us from China. So I don't see that changing because the policymakers are set up as that is the bipartisan issue today, and I don't think you can ignore that.
So switching to the near-term business environment, as you do when you're advising a CEO or a board today, what would you say is the single most important policy development or set of policy developments for them to watch for over the next 12 to 18 months? What should people be focused on?
Listen, AI is going to be a 10x or 100x multiplier over what we think its impact on the economy is going to be. I can't tell you whether it's 10, I can't tell you whether it's 100, but I know it's not 0. So really, it's innovation that's going to fuel innovation. And if you ask me what I'm concerned with, it's that we're rooted in historical precedent for things like intellectual property. We judge ROI based upon some protection or first in market, and we're able to calculate, here's what our return's going to be. Well, in the United States, we have either a 9 or a 13-year intellectual property, depending upon what the biologic or pharmaceutical product is. AI can potentially create a way to go around that intellectual property and produce something that solves a healthcare problem without any infringement on intellectual property. When that happens, so you've got intellectual property protection. What's that mean if somebody's at market half of what you're charging? So I see the need to have flexibility in how you figure ROIs going forward, because you can't necessarily put in a box, here's what AI allows us to do. We just frankly don't know yet. And if you'd asked me 12 months ago, would I see drones in Ukraine actually targeting off of AI learning, I wouldn't have thought it was possible. But 100% of what's going on in Ukraine today is driven by AI capabilities. And I think that's a sign of warfare for the future. But it's also a sign to us that the accelerated pace of the impact that these technologies are going to have continues to spin and spin and spin. So the likelihood is you'll have a change in something that you filed a patent for, where there will actually be a new version of it before the patent is ever considered by the patent office or wherever you are in the world. And I just think that Europeans and Americans have a very difficult time at adjusting to that velocity of change. And it's because we're built off of historical milestones. I never will forget the first time that I went to Prague right after the revolution. And they were highlighting the fact that they had deployed telephony to everywhere in the Czech Republic in 6 months. And being a dumb American, I looked at him and said, how could you put up that many poles? And the MCI guy looked at me, he said, no, we just slapped up remote transmitters on the side of all these apartments, microwave transmitters, and everybody had telephone service. But you see, I think of it in a historical fashion. My dad died about 12 years ago, and I remember 2 days before he died, when he was still coherent, he looked up at me and I said, Dad, is there anything you're going to miss? And I expected some philosophical statement. He said, yeah, I'm going to die and I'm not going to know how a fax machine works. Now, think about this. This is a guy that lived from the radio to the TV. That was a monumental thing, and then a cell phone and a fax machine. Imagine what our children and our grandchildren are going to experience in their lifetime as it relates to change. You don't have to know how it works. You just have to know how to use it, and how to use it to your benefit.
Yeah. So one thing I've been amazed at in working with you and our colleagues is really how impactful policy is on a company, whether they realize it or not, and how important it is to understand and have resources available to navigate that policy. You can provide input, you may not move the needle, but you certainly want to be at the table and understand what's going on. What's one thing that you might wish business leaders understood about how Washington actually works?
I'm going to include Washington and the EU in this together.
Okay.
CEOs assume that because people were elected, they're smart. I'm proof that that's not right. But the lesson here to everybody is that emerging technologies have to have an education component in the bodies that will eventually regulate them. And you can either allow somebody to do it without the knowledge that they need to do it right, or you'll spend a tremendous amount of money trying to go back and change the policy or the regulation to fit what in fact your technology does. There are a lot of good folks that serve, but the capacity to learn some of these issues and to believe that you can, in the case of the United States Senate, motivate 59 other people that are as educated as you to vote on a policy on ratings of token trading or something, I take something wild. It requires an investment on the part of the innovator. So what do we do in Washington that's different from everybody else that sort of works Capitol Hill in the executive branch? We become an educational partner with our clients. We actually take our clients as thought contributors to Capitol Hill, and we sit down with people that we're trying to develop as champions on their issue, so that we've got designated individuals that we know understand their business, maybe not exactly their business, but the sector that they're in. And they've been educated on the things that are most important from a policy or a regulatory perspective. That way, we're ahead of the game because they're writing in what's beneficial to that sector to grow and to flourish. In the absence of that, and the EU as it relates to AI is a great example. They did regulation. They thought this was the right regulation. Capital cut off the next day. You deplete capital, you've got a market that's not going to grow. And though we were the beneficiary of it, we still have to write AI regulation. We still have to regulate AI robotics. We still have to regulate AI's intersection with healthcare. All of these things are yet to happen. So we're trying to take clients who are in those specific sectors, get them to Capitol Hill, and let their firsthand knowledge of how it should be done be transferred over to policymakers. And in that case, then we're creating relationships with clients that are long-term versus crisis management operations. I see we're out of time. My parting comment to all of you is thank you for what you do. My biggest fear, and I'll go back to what Jeff started with, what keeps me up at night. I already know that there's not enough capital to fuel all the innovation that's going on in the world right now. My hope is that the ones that matter the most get that funding, because my grandchildren lose if it's not funded. But also recognize the fact that governments around the world can't continue to write checks at the pace they're doing it. So it is what you do, and it's your investments that are going to drive a majority of the impactful technologies for the next 10 years. And I wish you all the success in the world, because my children and my grandchildren are the beneficiaries of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator Burr. Thank you, Jeff Baglio. We appreciate the support of DLA Piper. We appreciate all of our partners. For those of you that are just joined, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Senator Burr. Thank you. My name is Christina Riboldi. I'm the executive producer of the GCVI Summit. This is the 10th year anniversary. This is a very special year, not just for GCV, but for you, because we have opportunity ahead of us, right? We're talking about capital. We're talking about supporting innovation. I know some of you in the room from the multinational side are looking at becoming more involved as indirect investors. And some of you might have known that we launched a pilot last year called the LPGP Summit. We're going to do it again. We're actually going to formalize it, sophisticate it, run it in September. And to that point, I'm so excited to welcome the next panel to the stage, because we're going to be in close partnership with the Kauffman Fellows Program. So thank you, Fernando Fabry, for being with us today as CEO. I've had a good run with the Kauffman Fellows for 20 years through the time of when Trish was at the helm. Thank you for being with us today at the helm of the Kauffman Fellows Program. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have Rob as well. Thank you so much. Please take your seats, and we'll get right into the next panel. Thanks.